I did not begin the past school year expecting to retire. I began the year wondering how best to survive what was becoming a career of data gathering rather than education. As I observed things becoming worse, I decided it was time for me to find something else to do. Any classroom educator understands that teaching is an art, not a science to be mined for data. Whatever happened to using subjective reasoning of the classroom teacher? When did teaching to the test become the norm? When I began teaching, there were a few teaching veterans who had cut their teaching teeth during the latter days of World War II. They thought they had seen change in 30 plus years of teaching. Yet, all things change. One day, the Horace Mann view of child-centered education will replace the data-centric insanity that has pervaded the profession. The suits may say that the methods of today are in the best interests of the child, but when the bright-eyed and eager primary school student is turned into the over-tested, what happens if I fail this test, my life is ruined high school student, something has gone wrong. Where is the joy in learning for the simple joy of learning? When did everything become a score that had to be achieved lest students and schools fail? When did we have to place a committee behind every technique or method that is used to remediate educational problems? How did nonconformists like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates make it in the world without the benefit of repeated ad nausea testing or data-centric lesson plans? We are told to think outside the box, but really, what is the public education system today but one gigantic box that keeps expanding? How did the greatest generation manage to defeat Hitler in Japan, develop the atomic bomb, and win the space race without having the benefit of today's methods used to gauge educational success? Why is it, if our educational system is so poor as compared to other nations and produce marginalized graduates, that these other nations are still trying to steal our military and technological secrets? Where is the joy? Where is the wonder? Where is the soul? A few years ago, I was directed to explain why several of my students were failing my class. I replied that they were honest with me and told me that they do not care. My administrator at the time replied back to me that was not a valid reason for their failure. I kid you not. Too many administrators have no problem insulating themselves from failure by documenting steps they have taken to inform their teachers what must be done in order to be in compliance with regulations and meet district expectations. These once long ago teachers appear to have conveniently forgotten that the classroom teacher does not have the leisure of depending on professionals who often fear for their jobs, but all too often have to deal with disinterested teenagers who can honestly care less. Of course, they are feeling their own heat from the politicians who often grandstand to the public the recent steps they have made the schools implement to ensure their children meet academic success. We educators have become victims to public opinion from a public that is blind to the struggles we are forced to face. This is the same public who have complained about teachers having the entire summer, Christmas, and Easter vacations off, paid sick and personal leave days, but when asked if they would ever be a teacher, will hold up a cross and splash holy water in defense against such an idea. We educators are held accountable for students who come from families where education has never been a priority and basic manners and respect have never been a model for them to follow. I am fortunate. As I enter the ranks of retired school teachers, I have another position to sustain me. I have taught scuba diving to middle school age students for the past 20 years. Teaching these students has sustained me in the educational world. True, my scuba munchkins want to be there. That helps. But the students are allowed to see diving as the exciting adventure it is. They are introduced to new worlds, to new civilizations aquatic, and boldly go where few have gone before. Don't scoff, it's true. When was the last time you have completed a unit and one or more of the students have exclaimed, "That was awesome"? Our classrooms can be like that again once we allow the joy of learning to re-enter our schools rather than the fear of failure. Once we allow the teachers to set the course rather than the suits in a central office or multi-story building. One year, one of my summer students was visiting from Great Britain. As teacher critics like to point out, U.S. scores are supposedly lower than European schools. I decided to find out. I asked him what type of test he had at school. He looked at me as if I had two heads. Test, he informed me with a hint of amusement. No, I added. Are they essay or multiple choice? His answer, what are multiple choice? That answers a lot. It has helped to sustain me that long ago, in early days of pedagogical history, teachers realized they needed slaves to step in and handle that day-to-day running of their academies. Thus, the first administrators were born, allowing the teachers to do what they do best, teach. I wonder when the roles were reversed and the specialists in the classroom became the slaves to the administrators. Had times have changed. I cannot honestly fault the administrators within the school. They are only following the dictates of the suits above them. Yet, they have the teachers they may use as cushions, as reasons for their failure of the schools to achieve. If teachers try to blame the students, they are directed to present more detailed lesson plans or assigned additional training to meet the needs of the underachieving population. Let us not forget that educational scores rise when families support education within the home. Has anyone dared to imagine how scores would change if the administration and faculty of a highly achieving school from one of the wealthier neighborhoods were transferred en masse to one of the poorer achieving schools in the district, expected to teach where the present school-age population would be the first in the family to graduate high school? They would be forced to face a set of problems and frustrations with which they are unprepared. I do dare say that there would be little change in the scores. Indeed, how well would those who create these plans and workshops for teachers fare if they were forced to teach a year in an underachieving school? I once had an opportunity to ask the headmaster of a respected Richmond private school how they can judge their students' success if they do not have SOLs. He smiled at me and told me that they look to see which colleges the students enter. That, too, answers a lot. The truth is, public schools are failing. SOL scores may ultimately rise, and the suits may point to the scores and tell the public their methods are working. But what of the quality? What of the basic inherent understanding of the students? What of the love and excitement of learning? What knowledge will they carry with them a year from now? 5 years? 10? Scores will inevitably rise when teachers are told to teach to the test. But what have we lost in return? My grandmother, a teacher who began work when Woodrow Wilson was president, told me about a student she taught who never quite grasped the fundamentals of the ABCs. I knew he may never be more than a street sweeper, she said, but I knew I could help him be a good citizen. And here we are today, with students forced, and yes, I do mean forced, as it is a part of the testing curriculum, to take the PSAT test, and teachers under threat if they do not meet SOL achievement goals. Educators are being forced to make that good citizen street sweeper into a disgruntled, frustrated college wannabe. I am reminded of how the artists in the former Soviet Union were forced to kowtow to a set of guidelines concerning how their art should be developed and presented in order to meet a supposed standard that would be beneficial to the Soviet people. Is education in the United States undergoing a transformation to a repressive Soviet style of bureaucracy? Does this mean we give up? Certainly not. We become realistic and use basic common sense and show greater decency toward teachers. I leave this discourse with a success story. Keep in mind that despite being exceptional ed students, even those on a modified or special diploma, as long as they were enrolled in the academic curriculum, they were expected to sit for the SOL. In one of my self-contained classes, before they were dissolved and all the non-intellectually disabled students were placed into collaborative general mainstream classes, I was teaching the students the differences between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. I explained their different philosophies to the students and showed a short video about the Harlem Renaissance. To be honest, none of these students passed the history SOL. Given a picture of a black child dreaming of being either an astronaut or a farmer, and asking a multiple choice question as to which dream would be associated with which man, the students had no clue. But in the class discussion that day, I asked which one of the men they would choose to be their model. Keep in mind that I was the only Caucasian in the room. I expected the consensus to be with W.E.B. Du Bois. It was. Everyone agreed that Du Bois spoke for their dreams and hopes of a better life. Yet, one student added, I would support W.E.B. Du Bois, but if I lived back then, and I lived in the South, I know I would have to get along, so I think I might support Booker T. Washington, because that way I could survive. She got it! She understood the lesson. The SOLs do not measure that type of fundamental understanding. Those moments of clarity are not touted to the public because you cannot type that into a spreadsheet. She was not a failure. Despite what my class SOL scores may have been, I was not a failure. I guided her to an understanding of herself that would make her a good citizen and a better person. I achieved success. May all of you who remain fighting the good fight have your own successes as well.